The thing about heartbreak is that it never announces itself. It doesn't knock. It doesn't send a text saying, "Hey, your whole world is about to tilt sideways. Maybe sit down." It just walks right into a luxury department store on a Tuesday afternoon wearing another woman's perfume and your boyfriend's hand on its waist. Wendy Adeora Osei saw them before they saw her. That was the only mercy God extended that day. She had just stepped off the elevator on the 4th floor of Galleria Lux in Abgujong, the kind of floor where the air itself smelled expensive, where sales associates wore black gloves to handle the merchandise and called you Nim, in a voice so soft it felt like being wrapped in cashmere. Wendy had come for one thing, a new handbag. Specifically, the limited edition Bottega Veneta Intrecciato clutch in midnight oxblood that had been sitting in her cart for 3 weeks. She'd saved for it. She deserved it. She was having a full Tuesday. She stepped off that elevator in a deep plum satin slipskirt that caught the light like liquid, paired with a structured ivory collarless blazer with gold hook closures up the front, and strappy black Valentino heels with a single crystal at the ankle. Her hair was in a sleek high puff, her edges laid like an art form, gold hoops brushing her jaw. She looked like someone who ran a board meeting and then went dancing after. She looked expensive. Not in the way that screams for attention, in the way that earns it quietly and then watches you realize you've been staring. She felt good. And then she turned left toward the Bottega counter and saw Shin Jae-won. Her Jae-won, her man, standing 12 feet away with his hand pressed to the small of another woman's back like he'd done it 1,000 times. Wendy stopped walking. Her brain, bless its self-protective soul, ran through the options at rapid speed. Option 1. That is not Jae-won. It was absolutely Jae-won. 6'2", custom navy overcoat, hair swept back in that way. That had made her stupid for him. The small scar on the left side of his jaw that she had kissed so many times she could draw it from memory. Option 2. That is his cousin. His cousin was short, balding, and lived in Busan. Option 3. That is a totally platonic business associate. The man's hand was at the curve of her waist and sliding. That was not a business meeting. The woman he was with, Wendy's brain served her the information like a news anchor reading tragedy calmly, was Yu Seoyeon. Wendy knew who she was because everyone knew who she was. Seoyeon was 26, 5'9", with a face that looked like it had been assembled by a committee of perfectionists and then approved unanimously. She was the kind of beautiful that made strangers apologize for existing in the same room. She'd been in 3 magazine covers in the last year alone. But her real reputation, the one that moved in whispers through the penthouses and private clubs of Seoul's elite, was different. Seoyeon was an escort, not a secret one, a celebrated one. The kind of woman whose rates were not listed anywhere because if you had to ask, you couldn't afford it. Billionaires requested her company for charity galas and Formula One weekends in Monaco. She had a waiting list. She had a waiting list. Wendy stood very still. There is a particular kind of pain that doesn't feel like pain at first. It feels like your body forgetting what temperature it is. Like someone quietly removed something important from inside your chest and you're only now noticing the space. She and Jae-won had been together for 8 months. 8 months of late-night drives through Gangnam with the windows down. 8 months of him showing up at her apartment with japshi from that one restaurant she liked, the one that didn't deliver. 8 months of inside jokes and stolen weekends in Jeju and his jacket around her shoulders when it rained. She had been close. Not officially his girlfriend, he was careful. About that word, she'd noticed always something slightly out of reach about the way he held things, but close enough that she had started to let herself imagine. She had almost settled for almost. She watched Seoyeon laugh at something Jae-won said. A practiced laugh? Beautiful and empty. And Jae-won looked pleased with himself in a way that made Wendy's stomach drop. And then, something shifted. It moved through her like a tide going out. Like her body quietly, efficiently, without drama, decided. We are not doing this. Not the screaming. Not the confrontation in the middle of Galleria Lux with the black-gloved sales associates watching. Not the tears in the elevator. Not the phone calls to her friend Kayamika at midnight with snot and regret. None of it. Wendy Adeora Osei took one slow breath. She looked at Jae-won. Really looked at him the way you look at something you're about to let go of, and she said, out loud to absolutely no one in a conversational tone, HM, I was going to buy a clutch. Turns out I'm getting a whole character arc Tuesday really said choose your own adventure. The sales associate nearest to her blinked. Wendy smiled at her. Sorry, talking to myself. Do you carry the Bottega in midnight oxblood? She did not walk toward J1. She did not make a scene. She completed her purchase. The clutch and also a pair of white toe team trousers she hadn't planned on because her hands needed something to do, and she rode the elevator back down with the composure of a woman who had simply decided that today was not the day she fell apart. Maybe tomorrow. Maybe never. But not today, not here, and not for him. She stepped out of Galleria Lux into the September Sol air, bags in hand, heels clicking a clean rhythm on the pavement, and she thought, he wants to play? Fine. But I don't play games I can't win. And I have never lost. She told Kayamika that same night. Kayamika Obi, her best friend, fellow Lagos girl transplanted to Seoul. Currently working in international finance and perpetually overdressed for every occasion. Sat on Wendy's kitchen counter eating banana milk straight from the carton and listening with the stillness of a woman processing actual criminal behavior. So Kayamika started. Seoyin. The Seoyin. The very one. Kayamika set down the banana milk. Wendy. I know. The woman has a concierge. I am aware. He brought her to Galleria. On a Tuesday. Like she's a normal Tuesday activity. Kayamika. I'm just saying, the audacity required to. I know. Wendy was sitting cross-legged on her couch in a silk charmeuse lounge set the color of warm sand. Her clutch on the coffee table. Her face perfectly calm in a way that scared Kayamika more than tears would have. I'm not crying about it. Are you sure you're okay? I'm better than okay. Wendy looked at her nails. A deep burgundy, freshly done. I'm motivated. Kayamika studied her best friend for a long moment. She had known Wendy for 11 years. She had seen her laugh until she cried at a funeral because the pastor mispronounced something. She had seen her survive 3 moves, 2 job changes, 1 visa crisis, and a situationship with a French man named Bastien who shall not be named. She knew what Wendy looked like when she was performing okay. This was not that. This was Wendy loading. What are you thinking? Kayamika asked carefully. Wendy smiled, and it was slow, and it was sweet, and it was cold. I'm thinking, she said, that the most powerful thing I can do right now is absolutely nothing. Just yet. She reached for her banana milk. And then everything. She didn't break up with J1. She didn't confront him. Didn't bring up Seoyin. Didn't ask where he'd been Tuesday afternoon. Didn't cry. Didn't go cold overnight in a way he'd notice and investigate. She simply, quietly, surgically, with the patience of a woman who had decided to become a problem, began. It started with a single word. Busy. The first time Wendy told J1 she was busy, he laughed. Not meanly, just surprised. Because Wendy had never been busy for him. She'd always made time. She was warm like that, generous with her presence, and he'd gotten comfortable in the warmth of her the way people get comfortable with sunlight. Assuming it will always be there, never thinking to appreciate it until a cloud moves in. The cloud had moved. Busy. He was on the phone. His voice carrying that particular lazy confidence of a man who'd never been told no by someone he wanted. Doing what? Things. She was buffing her nails. Kayamika was across from her mouthing get him silently. I'll talk to you later, J1. She hung up. J1 stared at his phone. He called back. She sent it to voicemail, not immediately, which would seem intentional, but after 3 rings, which felt natural. Plausible. She's just genuinely occupied. He left a voice note. She listened to it 8 hours later and responded with a single emoji. Slightly smiling face. The slightly smiling face was Kayamika's idea, and it was devastating in its ambiguity. What Wendy understood about men like J1, men who were powerful, who were used to being pursued, who had built their sense of self on the assumption of desire, was that the worst thing you could do to them wasn't anger. Anger meant they still had influence over you. Anger was engagement. Anger was caring. Distance was the real weapon. Not cruelty. Not games. Not manufactured jealousy or dramatic disappearing ex. Just genuine reorientation. Wendy stopped making J1 the center of her calendar and replaced him with herself. She started going back to the dance fitness class she dropped because their schedules conflicted. She booked a solo trip to Busan for a weekend and sent him 1 photo. A sunset over the water, no caption, and did not respond to his, "Why didn't you tell me you were going?" until she was already home. She was living, and he could see it, which was somehow worse. Within 3 weeks, the calls had doubled. The sex, or rather the absence of it, was its own separate masterpiece. Wendy had always been, in her own private assessment, too generous in that area. Not desperate, not performative, just present. J1 was attractive and she'd liked him, and so she'd shown up fully, which in retrospect she was now taxing him retroactively for. With interest, she started finding reasons. I have an early morning. I'm not feeling it tonight. Let's do it another time, said in the sweetest voice. Said with a touch on his arm and a smile and no indication that anything was wrong. This was important. She was not punishing him. She was simply unavailable. There's a difference. Punishment can be apologized into. Unavailability has to be earned back. J1 was not used to earning. By week 4, he sent flowers to her office. Not the casual bouquet. The gesture bouquet. An enormous arrangement of white dahlias and dusty rose peonies, delivered by a man in a suit with a handwritten card. Her co-workers gathered around her desk with the energy of people watching a nature documentary. Her colleague Bora, who had never expressed a personal opinion about anything in 3 years, looked at the flowers and then at Wendy and said, "You did something." "I did nothing," Wendy said genuinely. "That's the point." Then came the shopping. J1 had always been generous in the casual, offhand way of men who never have to think about money. Splitting a bill here, a nice dinner there, gifts that said, "I saw this and thought of you," without meaning very much. It had been comfortable, uncomplicated. Now something had shifted in him. The comfort was gone. The ease had curdled into effort, and effort required currency. He took her to Dior first. "Pick something," he said, and he meant it the way men mean it when they're trying to get back into a room they sense closing. Wendy walked through that store with the composure of a woman who had prepared for this. She touched things slowly. She considered. She didn't squeal or rush or perform gratitude. She selected a structured black bar jacket and a pair of white wide-leg trousers with a silk waistband, runway pieces, quiet and authoritative. And she thanked him in a voice that was warm but not moved. He wanted moved. She gave him warm. It wasn't enough for him, which meant he tried harder. Valentino 2 weeks later. A oyster-white feather-trimmed coat that cost more than some people's rent, and matching heeled sandals in nude patent leather. Wendy wore the coat to a dinner and received 4 compliments from strangers before the appetizers arrived. Then Celine, a caramel leather maxi skirt so buttery it moved like water, a pair of sunglasses, a belt bag, then a Jeju trip, fully covered, in a private villa where the ocean was visible from the bathtub. Wendy went to Jeju. She swam. She ate well. She came back rested and radiant and told J1 she'd had a lovely time in a tone that indicated she would have had a lovely time regardless of whether he had paid for it. He was, she observed with private satisfaction, unraveling. The money she was saving, her own money, her income from her UX design contracts with the 2 Korean tech firms she consulted for. She was now pouring into something she'd been sketching for 2 years, Aura and Company. It was a digital lifestyle brand. Content, curated products, eventually a physical space. Wendy had the vision down to the color palette, deep terracotta, aged ivory, brushed gold, and the brand voice, warm, smart, unapologetically luxurious. She'd been sitting on the idea because she'd been sitting on herself, distracted by a man and a relationship that had made her feel almost but not quite chosen. Almost but not quite turned out to be excellent business fuel. She registered the business. She built the website. She started posting styling content, lifestyle, a little humor, a little commentary, and the internet, as it occasionally does when something genuine appears, started paying attention. 6,000 followers in the first month. 12,000 by month 2. Brands started sending inquiry emails. Kayamika, who understood numbers in the way Wendy understood aesthetics, looked at her analytics one evening and said, "Wendy, you're building something. I know. Like an actual thing. I know." Kayamika pointed at the screen. "This brand in Tokyo wants to partner." "I know." I already replied. Wendy was pressing her edges in the mirror, not looking up. She was wearing a structured cognac leather shirt dress with a self-tie belt and gold-capped mules. She had a meeting. "I also have a call tomorrow with a Seoul-based interior lifestyle company. They want an ambassador for their new line." Kayamika blinked. Then she looked at the flowers on the counter. Fresh ones, from J1, delivered that morning. Does he know any of this is happening? Wendy capped her edge brush, looked at herself in the mirror, smiled. Not the cold smile, not the warm one, the other one, the private one she kept just for herself. He thinks I've been emotional, she said. Let him think that a little longer. The first billionaire was an accident. His name was Marcus Achimpong, Ghanaian British, 41, founder of a Pan-African fintech infrastructure company with offices in Lagos, London, and Seoul. He had read about Wendy's brand through a mutual connection in the Seoul expat business community, and he'd reached out through his assistant requesting a meeting to discuss a potential collaboration for his company's lifestyle vertical. Wendy almost declined. She told Kayamika, "I don't think I'm ready." Kayamika said, "You have 48 hours to decide if being ready is a requirement or an excuse." Wendy went to the meeting. She wore a sculptural ivory tuxedo suit, sleeveless, with wide peak lapels and high-rise trousers, nipped at the waist by a single hand-stitched seam. No blouse underneath. A pair of black suede Louboutin slingbacks with a pointed toe and her hair in a sleek low bun with two loose strands framing her face. Gold cuffs at both wrists. She walked into that boardroom and Marcus Achimpong stood up when she entered. Men who run fintech empires do not stand up when consultants enter boardrooms. She noted this and filed it away. The meeting lasted 40 minutes longer than scheduled. Marcus's team was sharp, and Wendy was sharper. She had studied his company's positioning, identified 3 specific gaps where aura and company's aesthetic language could bridge his brand into lifestyle markets he hadn't cracked, and she presented it with the calm specificity of someone who had been preparing for this conversation her whole life, even when she didn't know she was. At the end, Marcus said, "You're not what I expected." Wendy said, "What did you expect?" He smiled. "Someone less certain." "I've recently become very certain," she said, and meant it in more ways than he'd ever know. They signed a 6-month ambassador agreement 3 days later. It was the largest contract Aura and company had ever signed. It was also the first. Wendy transferred the deposit into her business account, stared at the number, then called Kayamika, who screamed for approximately 45 seconds. The second billionaire was not an accident. His name was Park Sungo, old soul money, tech investment, the kind of quiet influence that didn't need to announce itself because everyone already knew. He attended a rooftop launch event that Aura and company co-hosted with a beauty brand in Itaewon, and he spent 20 minutes in conversation with Wendy by the bar that had nothing to do with the event. He asked about her, really asked about her work, her vision, where she saw herself in 5 years. Wendy answered truthfully. She had stopped performing smallness. He gave her his card at the end of the night and said, "Call my office. There's a project I think you'd find interesting." She called. The project was interesting. She took it. J1 found out about Marcus the way people always find out things in Seoul's elite circles. Sideways? Through a third party? At a dinner he didn't know she'd also attended. He called her on a Thursday evening. "You're working with Marcus Achimpong?" "MM." She was editing brand copy on her laptop, feet tucked under her on the couch, a glass of cold barley tea on the table. "Since when?" "A few months." A pause. "You didn't tell me. You didn't ask." She kept her voice pleasant. Not defensive, pleasant. "There's a difference." "How do you know Marcus?" "He moves in the same circles." "Wendy." Another pause, heavier this time. "Are you?" He stopped. "Am I what?" He couldn't finish the sentence. Because the sentence was, "Are you becoming someone I can't keep up with?" And men like J1 do not say that sentence out loud. They orbit it. They circle it in the dark. "Nothing," he said. "Let me take you to dinner this week." "I'll check my schedule," she said. She did not check her schedule. She ended it on a Saturday. Not dramatically. Not in public. Not with receipts or screaming or the list of grievances. She absolutely could have produced, annotated, and presented in a bound document. She was done with performances. She invited him to her apartment. She made tea. Not because she owed him comfort, but because she was not cruel and cruelty had never been the point. She was wearing a deep navy oversized cashmere sweater and wide-leg ivory trousers. Her hair loose, gold studs in her ears. She looked comfortable. She looked like herself. She looked like a woman sitting in the full knowledge of who she was. She said, "I think we should end this." J1 looked at her. "Why?" She smiled at him, genuinely, warmly, not the cold smile, and said, "Because I like you too much to resent you, and I will if I stay." She did not say, "I saw you in Galleria Lux." She did not say, "Sioyan." She did not say, "You almost made me small." Those were her things. She was keeping them. He sat with it for a moment. Then, "Is there someone else?" "Yes," she thought. "Me. I finally chose me." "No," she said. He left an hour later. He stood at the door and looked at her in a way that meant he understood. Not everything, not the whole story, but enough. He understood that something had happened, a turning, and that he had been standing in the wrong direction when it occurred. "Wendy, take care of yourself, J1. She closed the door. She stood in her apartment, her beautiful apartment, with the brand partnership contracts on her desk and the Bottega clutch on the shelf and the Aura and company website open on her laptop showing 62,000 followers and climbing. And she felt, not sad, not triumphant either, exactly, complete, like a sentence that has found its period. Like a woman who had walked into a store for a handbag and come out with a revolution. She texted Kayamika, "It's done." Kayamika replied in 4 seconds. "Dinner. Now. Everything. Wear the feather coat." Wendy laughed. A real one, deep from the chest, and went to her closet. She put on the feather coat. She looked in the mirror. "Wendy Ada Ora Osei," she said out loud to herself, the way she should have been saying it all along. "You are exactly the right amount of everything." She grabbed her bag. She walked out into the soul night like she owned it, because she was building toward the day that she would. 6 months after Wendy closed that door, J1 sent flowers. Not the guilt bouquet. Not the "I saw this and thought of you" bouquet. The "I have made a significant error in judgment, and I am now prepared to acknowledge it publicly" bouquet. An absurd, towering arrangement of white garden roses and Japanese ranunculus delivered to her office on a Wednesday morning. So large that her colleague Bora had to move her monitor to make room for it. Bora read the card without being asked and said, in a completely flat voice, "He says you are the standard he measured everyone else against and they all failed." Wendy looked up from her laptop. She was on a call. She pressed mute, looked at the flowers, looked at Bora and said, "Compost bin." Bora nodded like this was a completely reasonable instruction, which it was. The card, Wendy read later, privately, alone, because she was human and curious and not made of stone. She read it standing in the elevator on her way to a 4 p.m. meeting, heels clicking, a sleek chocolate-brown turtleneck tucked into high-waisted black tailored trousers, a caramel shearling overcoat draped over her shoulders like punctuation. She read it once, completely, without her face changing. Then she folded it in half, dropped it in the small bin by the elevator panel, and stepped out onto the 8th floor. The meeting was with a venture capital group interested in Aura and Company's expansion into a physical concept space. A curated lifestyle studio in Seongsu-dong, the kind of address that said arrived without saying anything at all. She sat down at the table and smiled at everyone and was completely, utterly, devastatingly present. J1 did not cross her mind again until she was home, in the bath, and even then only briefly, the way you think about a movie you watched years ago. "Oh yes, that happened." He called 3 weeks after the flowers. She answered because she had reached the particular altitude of healed where you can answer, without your heartbeat changing, and she wanted to confirm this for herself. "Wendy." His voice was the same. She had expected it to hit different and was privately pleased when it did not. "J1." She was stirring a pot of jollof, real jollof, the kind Kayamika's mother had taught them both at 22, smoky and red and deeply non-negotiable. Kayamika was sitting on the counter providing zero useful assistance and maximum commentary. "Did you get the flowers?" "I did. Thank you. I wanted to talk. Can I see you?" Wendy considered the jollof. "Why?" she asked, not unkindly, genuinely. She had moved past the need to be cruel and arrived at something more powerful. Sincere indifference to the answer. He was quiet for a moment. Then, "Because I think I made a mistake." She turned down the heat on the stove. "You probably did." "Wendy." "J1." She leaned against the counter, voice gentle, measured. The voice of a woman speaking a final truth she'd already made peace with. "I'm not angry at you. I want you to know that. But there's no door here anymore. Not because I'm punishing you, because I genuinely moved on, and I built something in the space where you used to be, and I'm not tearing it down for a conversation. Silence. I'm happy, she added. I actually really am. I hope you are too. She hung up and stirred the jollof. Kayamika, who had heard everything, stared at her for a long moment. That, she said slowly, was the most powerful thing I have ever witnessed in person. Wendy tasted the jollof. Needed more pepper. Pass me the Scotch bonnet. I'm serious. I feel like I should bow. Kayamika, pepper. The Seongsadong studio opened 4 months later. Aura and Company. The space occupied the ground floor of a converted early 20th century building on a quiet side street. The kind of street that smelled like roasted coffee and possibility. The exterior was painted in Wendy's signature deep terracotta, with brushed brass lettering above the door and a single large window that people stopped to look in from the street. Inside, warm ivory walls, aged oak floors, a small curated retail section where every product had been personally selected and tested by Wendy, a studio space available for brand shoots and creative sessions, a consultation corner with 2 velvet chairs the color of dark cognac, and a record player in the corner that played exactly the kind of music you'd want playing in the background of the best version of your life. On opening night, Wendy stood at the door in a floor-length sculptural off-white column gown with an asymmetric draped neckline. Her hair in an elaborate twisted updo pinned with a single gold bar, black pointed toe heels, and a tiny beaded black minaudière in one hand. She looked like architecture. She looked like intention. She looked like every quiet decision she'd made in the last year had finally stepped into the light and shown its face. Marcus Achimpong came. He brought his creative director and 2 board members and stood in the middle of the space and looked around with the expression of a man recalibrating a prior estimate upward. You built this in 8 months, he said. I had good motivation, Wendy replied, and smiled in a way that revealed nothing and communicated everything. Park Sungo sent a flower arrangement, an elegant, appropriately sized one, accompanied by a bottle of vintage champagne and a note that said, "First of many locations, I expect." Wendy had that note framed. It was hanging in her office by the end of the week. Kayamika gave a speech that made 6 people cry, including Wendy, which Wendy refused to admit and Kayamika photographed extensively as evidence. The space was fully booked for brand activations and creative sessions within 72 hours of the opening. The investment portfolio was Kayamika's doing, technically, though Wendy had learned fast. It had started with a single conversation. Kayamika, feet on Wendy's coffee table, pulling up a spreadsheet on her laptop and saying, "You're making real money now. You need to stop letting it sit." "It's sitting safely," Wendy said. "It's sitting uselessly." Kayamika turned the screen toward her. "This is what it could be doing." Wendy looked at the numbers. Then she looked at Kayamika. Then she said, "Teach me." And Kayamika, who loved nothing more than being asked to explain finance to a willing student, spent the next 4 Saturdays doing exactly that. Within a year, Wendy had a diversified portfolio. Index funds, 2 tech startups she'd met through the Marcus Achimpong network, a stake in a Lagos-based women's co-working space that Kayamika had flagged, and a small but deliberate real estate position. A studio apartment in Mapogu that she was renting out, and a plot of land back home in Ghana that her mother had advised her on in a 45-minute phone call full of proverbs Wendy had written down and taped to her bathroom mirror. She had a financial advisor. She had a lawyer. She had a quarterly review meeting with herself where she sat down with tea and her numbers and made decisions with the calmness of a woman who understood that money was not the destination but the tool, and tools needed maintaining. She was 29 years old. She was building. She ran into J1 once more. Not dramatically, not cinematically, just he was there at a private dinner in Hanamdong hosted by a mutual acquaintance. And she was there, and soul is large until it isn't. He saw her first this time. She was across the room in a strapless architectural black gown with structured boning and a dramatic sculptural hip detail that had been custom-made by a Seoul-based designer she'd featured on Aura and Company's platform and subsequently become close friends with. Her hair was down. Full, voluminous, gorgeous, with a single thin gold chain at her collarbone. She was laughing at something the woman beside her had said, her head thrown back, completely unguarded, completely herself, and the laugh filled the room the way her laugh always had. Like something good was happening and everyone nearby was invited to feel it. Jae-won stood very still for a moment. He had heard things, of course. Seoul talked. He'd heard about the studio, the partnerships, the investments, the name that was starting to move through rooms before she entered them. He'd put it together the way you put together a story you realized too late you were part of, in the wrong role. He crossed the room. She noticed him when he was 4 feet away. No flinch, no shift, just a calm, warm recognition. Wendy, J1. She smiled at him. It was real. It was also complete. There was nothing hungry in it, nothing unresolved, nothing that needed anything from him. You look well. You look. He stopped, looked at her. The room, the dress, the gold chain, the laugh that was still living in the air around her. You look like you won something. Wendy considered this. I did, she said simply. Myself. She clinked her glass lightly against his. A toast, a farewell, a full stop, and turned back to her conversation. She did not look back. She never had to. Later that night, in the car home, Aura and Company's first company car. A sleek matte black G-Wagon that Kayamika had called unnecessary and Wendy had called a business decision. She sat in the back with her heels off, feet tucked under her, the Seoul skyline passing outside the window in streaks of gold and neon. She thought about the girl who had stepped off that elevator in Galleria Lux 14 months ago, in a plum satin skirt with a saved-up clutch on her shopping list, and a man she'd almost settled for sitting 12 feet away with his hand on someone else. She thought about what that girl had done instead of falling apart. She pulled out her phone and opened the Aura and Company dashboard. 94,000 followers. 3 pending brand deals. A message from a magazine, a real one, the kind with a physical issue, requesting a feature interview. She typed back, "My team will be in touch. Looking forward to it." Then she put her phone away and looked out at the city. Seoul sparkled back at her like it was proud, like it had always known she was coming. Wendy Aora Osei never needed saving. She just needed a Tuesday in Galleria Lux to remember that she was the one doing the saving. All along, some women get broken by betrayal, and some women get built. Wendy was always the second kind. She just didn't know it yet.
Besties, some of us have been in that moment, not necessarily in luxury store in Seoul, but in that feeling. The moment you realize someone you loved, someone you almost built a future around, was never holding you as careful as you were holding them. And the first instinct is to fall apart, to make it loud, to let the pain run the show. In this story, we learn that the most powerful response to betrayal is not revenge, it is redirection. Every tear she didn't cry became a business plan. Every night she didn't wait by the phone became an investment. Every moment she chose herself over the comfort of staying small for someone who didn't deserve a full size, that became the empire. Besties, you are never the problem. You are just pouring yourself into the wrong container. And the moment that container showed you it's cracked, besties, don't lose your spark because someone didn't know what to do with their light. Don't shrink, don't beg, don't perform your pain for people who aren't careful enough with their heart. Get quiet, get focused, get building. The right people, the right opportunities, the right rooms, the right life are not found in the wreckage of chasing someone who chose elsewhere. They are found on the other side of the decision to choose yourself first, fully without apology. Wendy didn't win because she got revenge. She won because she refused to stop being Wendy. Besties, and that is the only move that has ever truly worked. Don't dim your light because someone was too comfortable in the dark. You are always meant to shine in the rooms they can't even get into. Stay soft, stay funny, stay strategic, and above all, stay you. Thank you so much for watching. Kindly like, subscribe, and share.